Wednesday was a dark day in WWE history. The company released or furloughed scores of employees and talent. We don't even have all the names of the office staff that were let go, but we do know the names of the talent and the producers. And I will read off the latest complete list that we have here in a moment. I talked in detail already about this at the start of my Wednesday night stream before my AEW Dynamite review. But before the cuts were announced, Vince McMahon was having quite the week for himself. First, we had the President of the United States announced that the great Vince McMahon would be part of a panel of sports commissioners and presidents and team owners, Jerry Jones and Mark Cuban, among others, that has been assembled to advise the president as to when and how they feel it would be appropriate to reopen the economy. You've heard of Avengers Assemble? Well, this is like the opposite of that. Dana White of UFC, also a good friend of the president's, he was included as well. The great Dana White, I'm sorry, I have to get it right. The Great White, I guess you could call him, Dana White. But the great Vince McMahon is going to lead us all to victory over this evil germ, the way that he once conquered the U.S. government. And now here we are in the ultimate heel turn. He is working on behalf of the very government that, according to his daughter, tried to destroy their family. You remember that, right? 2 days after the 9/11 attacks, Stephanie compared the attacks to the U.S. government trying to tear their family apart. Now here he is trying to help them. Here's a man who not only beat the government, he beat Ted Turner. Hell, he beat God. He beat God on pay-per-view once upon a time. If anybody can lead us back to a sense of normalcy, it's the great Vince McMahon. Because when I think of normal, I think of Vince McMahon. Now, his second attempt at the XFL also went belly up after just 5 weeks in operation. Other sports leagues had their seasons suspended as well. Only the XFL went bankrupt. Them being an upstart and all, it was their first season. I guess Vince saw that he was bleeding money and he was going to continue bleeding money, and he decided to pull the plug early and cut his losses. But the coup de grace of everything had to be WWE, along with other professional sports, because now the floodgates have opened for everybody to basically come into the state of Florida and try to run a show. But WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment, has been deemed an essential service in the state of Florida. That now puts them in the same category as grocery stores, local medical facilities, banks, restaurants, WWE. Makes sense. Meanwhile, all non-essential services, I believe, are still shut down. Now, the order, as signed by the governor of Florida, stipulates that employees in sports and media production with a national audience can continue only if the location is closed to the general public. This designation was made because these businesses are said to be critical to Florida's economy. Now, keep in mind that filming for WWE does not employ very many people for the state, and it damn sure doesn't create money for Florida if there's no fans allowed in attendance. These are empty building shows. In other words, it's horse shit. Now, I like having wrestling on TV. It gives me something to talk about. It's good for my show. It's good for business. I don't want wrestling to go off television if it can be avoided. You can find a way to tape every few weeks or whatever, and they have since made adjustments to their schedule that I'll get into here in a bit. So I like having wrestling on TV, don't get me wrong. But the idea that WWE is considered an essential service is beyond absurdity. WWE is an essential service the way this podcast is an essential service. Although some of you may think it is. It's an essential service the way that a happy ending at one of those Florida massage parlors would be considered an essential service during a pandemic. Now, this decision was made on April 9th, did not become public until April 13th, and it also just so happened to come on the very same day that a super PAC run by Vince McMahon's wife and favorable to the president. Of course, she used to work at the behest of the president. She was the president of the Small Business Administration. It just so happens that that super PAC announced that it had committed to spend over $18 million on political advertising in the state of Florida ahead of the November election. Well, how about that? That is quite the coinkydink, don't you think? I'm sure it's all just one big fat coincidence. WWE is not crucial to the Florida economy right now. WrestleMania would be, for the money that it brings in, but a bunch of empty arena shows at the PC means nothing to the Florida economy. Unless they were promised WrestleMania down the road, maybe in 2022. Maybe a makeup show in Tampa. That's very possible. That there were promises made that we are not yet aware of. Now, even more ridiculous, and I wasn't even aware of this, is that the Orange County Sheriff told the local news station that deputies responded to the WWE Performance Center more than once in March and again in April, advising them that they were not in compliance with the governor's executive order and advised them that they should have to shut down. You've got to close down. And then days later, the governor amended the order to allow for WWE to keep on running. Just the premise. Just the premise that they would be considered an essential service, an essential business, is laughable in just every way imaginable. Then came the cuts. For a company deemed essential, a good chunk of its workforce was not classified in the same way. Now, WWE, like a lot of other businesses right now across the country, are getting hit very hard. They're going to lose a lot of money. No doubt about it. Can't sell tickets, you're not going to make that money, even though that's not where the majority of their money is coming from. Merch, you'll sell some from WWE shop, but you're not going to sell what you would have sold because you can't have people in the buildings. People go to the buildings, they buy t-shirts. They buy foam. Do they even sell foam fingers anymore, or is that like a relic of the 80s? When I was younger, it was the Hulkamania foam finger. I don't know what they have. Maybe John Cena had that OK sign that he did. I don't know. But anyway, so you're going to lose money. And even though they remain cash rich at the moment, they have their next earnings call this coming Thursday. And to try to meet their, pre-virus projections, they felt they had to do some spring cleaning. Now, Vince McMahon announced the firing and the furloughing of staff and talent, cutting back on pay for executives. I don't know if he's including himself in that or not, but certain executives and board members are having their pay cut. And their plans to move their headquarters out of Titan Tower into a bigger building are now on hold for at least 6 months. And since they reduced their headcount by so much, who even knows if they need the bigger building now? They got rid of so many people, they may not be done yet. Do they even need the bigger building? Now, I already got into all the numbers on Wednesday. I don't want to rehash that again as far as the actual cash on hand that they have. This information, you can find it. It's in, the most recent press releases and the earnings statements and whatnot. And it's not just $500 million. I keep seeing $500 million. They have $500 million on hand. No, they don't. It's not $500 million in cash sitting in a bank account. It's not that simple. But they do have money. And they're not going bankrupt anytime soon. They wouldn't go bankrupt even if they kept all of those people and didn't cut anybody. Or if they asked them to take a pay cut, they would have survived just fine. But they saw it as a chance to trim the fat, and they took advantage of it at a time when it isn't exactly going to be easy for a lot of this talent to go out and find a new job, or any of these people, even the non-talent. But they have hoarded so many people, they have hoarded so much talent to keep them away from other promotions, that something like this was inevitable. Signing people for the sake of signing them to big money deals, in a lot of cases, big money. As I pointed out, when you hear about Anderson and Gallows getting cut, you remember that they just signed 5-year deals last summer, not even a year ago. They signed new contracts with the company that was set to be for a lot of money. Not quite $1 million, but close to $1 million a year for both guys, each guy. And you think you're locked in for 5 years. I've secured my future for at least the next 5 years. You can't go anywhere else, right? That's the sacrifice that you make. Can't go to New Japan, can't work a match here, work a match there. Some promotions do allow, even AEW has certain special deals. Jon Moxley can go work in New Japan, he can work in AEW. The Lucha Bros, they're still working all over the place. Well, not right now, they're not, but they were. WWE does not allow that. They don't play nice with others. Unless they can own you in some way. Like some of these UK promotions. They may not officially own them, but believe me, they own them. Otherwise, you sign a deal, it's exclusive, even though you're an independent contractor. You're locked into that deal. That is the expectation when you sign the contract. But WWE has the power to terminate you anytime they want. It doesn't go both ways. It's not a two-way street when it comes to these contracts. That 5-year contract does not give you job security. It gives WWE security in knowing that you can't go anywhere else. You belong to them. But they can terminate the agreement anytime they please, and that's what they did this past week with Anderson and Gallows and a lot of other people. Now, the producers in the company, supposedly they were furloughed. Some of them may not come back. I don't know who was furloughed, who was fired. I've read from some of these people themselves on social media, conflicting things. If they're furloughed, they're getting their benefits supposedly still, not being paid. They could be brought back as of July 1st, but that's not a guarantee. Those names include Lance Storm, who only started working as a producer there 4 months ago. He shut down his school to take the gig with WWE. Billy Kidman, he was there 13 years. Fit Finlay, gone. Mike Rotunda, IRS. They fired IRS on tax day. The fucking balls on these people. Shane Helm, Sean Devari, Pat Buck, Scott Armstrong, Sarah Stock, all gone. The other cuts included Kurt Angle, who is still working, I think, as a Raw producer behind the scenes. I don't know how that affects if he has like a Legends deal. I have no idea how any of that works. My understanding is he had a separate, full-time contract, and he's gone. Rusev, who just a few weeks ago pledged $20,000 of his own money to help WWE security people, production people, sitting at home with no income, now finds himself on the unemployment line. He had been at odds with the company. They were kind of at an impasse. So, is this something that he wanted? Possibly, although he may not have been expecting to be fired. But I kind of felt like this was inevitable. Maybe he was going to just, ride out the remainder of his deal. Lana is still there. Rusev is gone. Gallows and Anderson, I just mentioned them. AJ Styles went on his Mixer account. Sounded very upset about the situation. I mean, of course he would be. His friends got fired. His traveling buddies. He was, the three of them, they were just in one of the WrestleMania main events against The Undertaker. He blames himself for what happened. He feels that he could have done more to help his little brothers. He said their release was devastating. And you watch him talk about this. It was only like a 2-minute clip, but he was running through this gamut of emotions where he was sad, he was angry. You could tell he wanted to say more, but he He was smart enough to keep his mouth shut. He didn't take it too far. I'm sure a lot of the talent are feeling the same way, even the ones that kept their jobs. They probably have guilt. In this case, he has guilt that he couldn't do more to help his friends. Wasn't his fault. Had nothing to do with him. But that's how he feels. Drake Maverick. That video he put up on his Twitter was heartbreaking. Tears in his eyes, talking about losing his gig, losing his job. All the people he wouldn't be able to say goodbye to because everybody's at home, everybody's on quarantine. You don't even have the chance to say goodbye to everybody that you want to say goodbye to. Although in his case, they are allowing him to compete in the interim cruiserweight title tournament. He was announced as, one of the men in the tournament. He will have his 3 matches, and that will be it for him. Unless he wins, he's not going to win. So his last 3 matches, he's in Group A. He'll be wrestling Kushida, Tony Nese, and Jake Atlas. And that will be it for Drake Maverick in WWE. His good friend EC3. How many times have we talked about EC3 over the years? Wasted potential. Sitting at home collecting dust. Collecting a paycheck, not doing much else. I'm sure he couldn't be happy about that situation. Now he's gone. He's free. He's liberated. He's already posting on his social media, the best is yet to come. I hope so. I would love to see him go somewhere else and succeed, where in WWE he failed through no fault of his own. He may be the one guy I'd like to see succeed more than any other. out of all the people on this list of cuts. I want them all to do well, but I want him especially to be able to say, hey, look what you missed out on. Mike Chioda. Referee Mike Chioda, the longest tenured referee in WWE history. WWE just lost their longest tenured employee, who passed away, and now they've lost their longest tenured referee. He started in the company in 1989. Went full-time in 1992, never looked back. I know he's had a couple of issues over the years. I think he ended up in rehab once, but pretty much he's been there the whole way through. Hearing that may have bummed me out the most. Reminded me of the ring announcer, Mark Eaton. They shit-canned several years ago. He had been there 30 years. Gave him a kick in the pants and kicked him out of the company. Even Steve Austin has talked about this before. What the hell happened there with Mark Eaton? Mark was the one who used to throw him his beers. They should have kept him on for that alone. Eric Rowan, gone. Heath Slater, gone. Zack Ryder. God, I figured he was a lifer at this point. Zack Ryder, gone. Kurt Hawkins, gone for the second time. His wife Liz has a website, a blog that she maintains. She wrote a blog about how the virus has impacted her family, and she addressed her husband's firing. She said that Brian was released from his WWE contract. There was notice that morning that layoffs would begin, and our anxiety kicked into full gear, not just for ourselves, but friends and loved ones that this could potentially affect. Brian just needed to know if it was happening to him or not, and I was praying the phone didn't ring. Well, the phone rang, and I broke down. You can't really break down for long when your almost 3-year-old is running around chasing bubbles, but I cried. There is so much uncertainty in the world, it's terrifying. 1 week prior, they had wanted him to fly to Orlando to film for Monday Night Raw. And the next week, they're getting rid of people. I went from being scared of my husband coming home from work with the virus to days later him getting fired. Why do I feel helpless? For starters, I'm 30 weeks pregnant. It's not the most satisfying feeling when your husband loses his job and you don't have one for both of you to fall back on. I always said this past year, if I needed to go back to work, I could and would get back into my field, thinking 4 to 5 years if his contract didn't renew. Was not expecting him to lose his job when I'm 2 months away from having our child, let alone during a pandemic. And it just goes to show you, everybody's got a story to tell. It just goes to show you the very real impact that this is having on people. Having a kid in the middle of all this sounds terrifying. Even just having to visit a hospital with everything going on sounds terrifying, let alone the thought of losing your job at the same time. Leo Rush. Sometimes he can be his own worst enemy, but you can't deny the talent that this kid has. He's incredible. He would be a perfect fit for an AEW. He'd fit in there like a glove. Eric Young, No Way Jose, Sarah Logan, Primo and Epico, Mike and Maria Kanellis. Mike Kanellis spoke to Wrestle Talk about his release, and he had this to say. He said, I had already asked for my release in the past, although we did work things out after that. I didn't want it to happen during a pandemic. And I think that's a hard thing for me to try to explain to people, but there are a lot of people who are like, well, he did ask for his release, which I did, but my wife never did. And I want to make that clear. My wife was happy to stay there. But you think in the back of your head, yeah, I did ask for my release, but nobody wants to be released in the middle of a pandemic. You ask for your release when you think you can go and do other things. I asked for my release because I wasn't working, and I wanted to work. Well, now he's out of work. And his wife just had a child not too long ago. Aiden English hasn't been wrestling much. I don't think he's been wrestling at all. He's been working as an announcer for them since they took him out of the ring. He's gone. All main roster cuts have 90-day non-compete, so they would not be free to work anywhere else until mid-July. But really, right now, they can't work anywhere anyway. NXT names have no such 90-day non-compete. They're going to be paid for the next 30 days. And then at that point, they're free to do and go wherever they choose. Cassius Ohno, who's been more of a player coach for them in recent months in NXT UK, he appears to be gone. I don't think he's commented publicly on it, but they did move his name over to the WWE alumni section of the website. Deonna Purrazzo, gone. Alexander Jaksic, MJ Jenkins, Dan Matha, ring announcer John Loquasto, and interviewer Kat Marino. And per PW Insider, you can add these 6 names to the list of those released, although I don't know that you're going to recognize very many of them. Mohammed Abdel Fattah, an Egyptian-born talent, signed in January of 2018. Marcos Gomez, a Brazilian talent, signed in May of last year. With a background in Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he's gone. Faisal Kurdi, he was signed in June of last year after a tryout in Saudi Arabia. Hussein Aldagal, a bodybuilder from Saudi Arabia, signed also in June of last year. Yi Feng, who is known as Rocky in NXT, was a signee from China, signed in September 2016. He had been competing on the NXT live events as recently as a couple of months ago. And Edgar Lopez, who was signed in September of last year after a tryout in Chile. Last one hired, first one fired. That's the way it goes. 3 Performance Center coaches were cut as well. Ace Steel, who trained CM Punk and Colt Cabana, he was hired last October. Serena Deeb, from the Straight Edge Society to the PC. She's been working there since 2018. And the former IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion, Kendo Kashin, he was hired last August. All 3 of them are gone. And last but not least, at least one writer that we know of, it could be more, but at least one that went public was fired. The one that we know of is Andrea Lissenberger. She worked on the SmackDown side of things. She tweeted that a lot of people were let go at WWE today. Regrettably, I'm one of them, but I'm proud of the work that I've been able to do since I started in December. And I'm glad the storyline that I worked on resonated with so many people. That's what writing is about for me. Hashtag Otis and Mandy forever. So, as I said on Wednesday, she was either responsible or one of the people responsible for the Otis and Mandy storyline playing out on TV over these many months. And it has been the best story that they have told on WWE television. And of course, they fired the writer who was responsible for that storyline. It's just the way it goes. That's just the way it goes. So yeah, this is all going to ease the sting a little bit this week with shareholders. They'll save some money, but for a company deemed essential in the state of Florida at a time when they're making a record amount of money, we learn who is really essential and who is not. And if there's one thing to come out of this, it may be the days of doling out those big fat contracts to anybody and everybody to get them to come to WWE and not go someplace else. Those days may be over. The revival already said, hey, we're not interested. You can take your money and stick it. But they may be the last ones to get that kind of money thrown at them when they, supposedly, and who knows exactly what the figures were, but they were pretty high. The numbers bouncing around for Dash and Dawson were very high. And that could be the last time that sort of thing happens, Now, you could look at that as a bad thing for the talent because now they may be in a weaker position to play one company against the other the way that Randy Orton, for example, did when his contract was coming up. He admits he clearly played WWE and AEW against each other. He was playing up things online about, AEW, and then he landed himself a nice big fat contract to stay with WWE. Look at the way Edge got himself a hefty new contract when he went to Vince McMahon to tell him about the offer from AEW last summer. The party may be over. You knew it wasn't going to last forever. But I think it may help even the playing field a little bit more coming out of this. That's assuming that everybody else can survive, because right now there's no end in sight. And pro wrestling is not as essential as WWE and the governor of Florida would have you believe.